Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Neighbors Helping Neighbors podcast, brought to you by the Robertson County Democratic Party.
Hello.
I am Kailee. This is Morgan. We are back. We're married. We are ready to get back into talking politics, or I guess as ready as we will ever be, given the current state of things. But before we get into that, sorry.
Since I showed my ring, you should show your ring.
I should show mine for the people watching. Mine's harder to see on camera than yours is, but there you go. Before we get into politics, just as always, I have some event updates for you. Nothing huge going on so far this month. Just the next Robertson County Democratic Party meeting will be on Tuesday, May 19th at the Springfield Senior Center. And then just a reminder, as always, we have our Wednesday Ice Out protest outside the Robertson County Sheriff's Department from 8:30 to roughly 11 is about when everyone disperses on Wednesday mornings. And then on Saturdays from 1 to 3 p.m., we still have just kind of the general, what we're calling the Springfield Speaks protest series on the corner of Tom Austin and Memorial. You can park at the Belk parking lot. And again, that is just a come protest whatever is on your mind. If you don't have signs, generally there are a bunch of extra ones for you. So don't feel the need, if you're not sure what to put on a sign, we will have one for you. So hope to see you there. And this week, no really updates on the immigration package as far as hearing dates go, because unfortunately, while we were out, most of the bills have since either passed out and been sent to Governor Lee or already been signed into law by Governor Lee. So there's only, I think, one left that hasn't been, passed, finished going through session. But all of kind of the big ones that we were talking about did unfortunately pass. So I can have all those updates in the description like I normally do. But again, not really anything as far as hearings or anything goes. So that takes us straight into the topic for today.
Yes, and speaking of Democrats getting railroaded in the state political process, due to the fact that we have had some very seismic breaking decisions from the Supreme Court regarding how our voting process works, from local all the way up to how states choose the National House of Representatives. And that topic is redistricting. That's the boring name for it. And what it really is the voting districts that we are all in that determine what candidates you can vote for and whether or not those candidates can win. It's a bit of a complex system when you get into it, but essentially what it is that there are essentially like arenas drawn within each state, and these are voting districts. They're geographical regions where candidates will run.
Designed to represent that group of people in said district.
Yes. And supposedly the way it is supposed to work is that it is an impartial, nonpartisan, non-racial system where they determine purely based off of the voting characteristics of that area, how that area's district will be proportioned. And it's supposed to do so in a way that makes sure that each candidate has the best chance of having a fair and realistic campaign and race. So that the population of that state is fairly represented at the federal level. Exactly. Yes. Now, what we are seeing right now is the Supreme Court, in their most recent decision, has determined that partisan gerrymandering, which is the act of drawing districts for political favor of one candidate over the other or one political party over the other, has been basically deemed legal on partisan grounds. Technically, you can't racially gerrymander anymore, but you can gerrymander to make sure the other political party doesn't win. And the conservative majority of the Supreme Court has recently just done that. It is obviously political corruption. And because of that, that is the most recent, really, salvo that has come out of the Republican political institution regarding the wider redistricting fight that we've been seeing. It kicked off when Trump demanded from Texas that he wanted 5 more congressional representatives that were Republican from Texas, and that Texas should redraw their districts to create 5 additional Republican districts within the state of Texas. California responded by amending their laws to allow for gerrymandering to happen, and then putting a vote to the California people about whether they wanted to gerrymander in order to create enough Democratic representatives to offset Texas's gerrymander. And ever since then, it's all just blown up. States are gerrymandering left and right in order to generate favor for their chosen political parties. And currently, this most recent Supreme Court decision means that the majority Black and minority districts within the South that were created due to Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act can now be gerrymandered out of existence. The effect in Tennessee is that the one Democratic House member that we sent to Washington, D.C. for Memphis has now been eliminated, and Memphis is now 3 different voting districts, all with now majority Republican populations. They basically did that by drawing the districts out, so there's a lot of Republican towns and small cities diluting the vote of Memphis. The same thing happened in Nashville when Nashville originally had its own district, which meant it got to pick its own representative based on the population of Nashville. And now it's broken up between 3 districts, which Robertson County is a part of one of those districts. It's quite frustrating, really, because what it does is it goes after the very mechanisms that we use to fairly elect our representatives so that we can fairly be represented in Congress, which is a core constitutional right. No taxation without representation.
And before you get too far past it, I want to kind of go back a little bit to what the Supreme Court decision was and what they did in overturning it, and the reason why some people, obviously in the Supreme Court, the conservative side is arguing, why they made the decision that they did, is the Voting Rights Act and all of what you were talking about with gerrymandering and the way district lines are drawn. We take into consideration a lot of factors to ensure people are fairly represented. Race has been one of those things that has been used to draw district lines. But the issue comes when people start to argue that doing that is discriminatory against the non-minority communities, that by carving out these districts that are majority, Black, Hispanic, whatever minority race, that is now misrepresenting and taking away representation from white voters, when the original purpose of kind of that call out in the Voting Rights Act is because prior to that, the Black and minority vote was being disenfranchised. And so they had to take race into consideration to ensure that these pockets of communities were being fairly represented. And that was, has been interpreted in various different ways over the years since it was passed. And that's, I think, the Supreme Court decision recently makes it more clear that, or they're trying to define it as this was created to give Black people like an advantage over the rest of the voting population, when that's not what the original purpose of it was.
Yes, the original purpose was those Black people were getting screwed over. So Section 2 was designed to bring them back up into the more level playing field, allowing them to have their own representation in Congress, because during the Jim Crow era of the South, post-Civil War, the Southern politicians were not going to let that happen naturally. They were going to cut up and dilute the Black vote of the Southern states so that the Black people never did get representation, so that minorities never did get proper representation under the Constitution. It was always going to be some Jim Crow era Republican that would never Jim Crow era conservative that would never give them the representation they needed. So that is why Section 2 was made. And yeah, the Republicans are really weaselly about the language around it, saying, oh, this gives them an advantage. No, what it does is it brings them up to the playing field and allows them to participate in the political process where otherwise bad actors and political operatives would keep them from doing so. Well, the Supreme Court has basically just gutted that, and in essence, gutted a lot of the teeth of the Voting Rights Act. No, they still can't do poll taxes. No, technically, a mob of white guys is not allowed to come and chase you out of the polling center now. Now, it's just, if you go to the polling center and vote, it's to be guaranteed that the Democratic candidate will never win because the district is drawn in a way that will make them never win.
And not the reason, but a reason. There's a lot of reasons,
Yes.
but a reason that this is true and that this is the reason why they are doing it is because this redistricting is only happening in southern states to blue districts.
Yeah, they're not mixing up the existing Republican districts in order to change things up there. No, as you see, it's mainly splitting blue cities amongst multiple rural Republican districts to dilute the vote of those blue cities. That's what happened with Nashville, and that's what happened. And it would have happened earlier with Memphis, but Memphis, due to being majority black, was under Section 2 protection. Now, Section 2 protection no longer exists, which, by the way, I just can't get over the fact that the largest court in our land, the final authority on how the Constitution is interpreted, has just said, you can do political corruption for partisan purposes. That's completely fine, apparently. Like, geez, man.
Yeah, that's wild.
What kind of country we live in? Seriously. Now, this is essentially politicians picking their voters, because if the politicians are in on the redistricting process, which they are, the Tennessee House Legislature determines the maps and brings them forward, and then the court okays them or not, which they have done so. This allows the different state house representatives and the different congressional representatives to effectively pick which districts they're going to be running in and pick the populations of those districts by drawing the lines in such a way. Like, if you look at the voting district map of Tennessee, it's wild. Like, the districts cutting all the way through different territories that don't make sense culturally or based on the norms and customs of the different states and cities. It's only done because they determine, these 6 population centers will vote red, so we're going to dilute the one blue population center by snaking this district out to cover it too. Or in the case of Nashville, splitting it like a pie so that the Nashville vote can never unify together to pick one political candidate. This effectively undermines the whole principle of people picking their representatives and having a choice. No, the politicians are picking who you can vote for, and they're going to rig it in a way where the person that you are allowed to vote for is always going to do what the overall Republican establishment, especially in Tennessee, wants you to do.
And don't get us wrong, this is something that's been going on for a while.
Yes.
I mean, that's why we have the term gerrymandering. This is something, this is not something necessarily new to, elections in America, but a big difference now is, one big difference is generally this is something that is done every 10 years after we've done our census. So we have a better understanding of what the population in every state looks like. So then we have a better chance at drawing a fair and equal congressional map. The fact that in the past year, how many states have had special sessions to draw, maps outside of that typical 10-year period is nuts. Like, we are escalating at an insane rate of how quickly we are moving towards this idea of politicians picking their voters. Like, it has always been around, but this is we've escalated at this point.
Yes, very much so. Escalated to the point, really, of what I would almost call political balkanization, where if this keeps going on in the manner that it is, the only way that you're going to get representation is if you move to a state where your party is in control. Like, if this redistricting in Tennessee is allowed to go along, unless we can dummy mander some districts, we're just not going to get representation because the Republican representatives are not going to listen to Democratic voters because they know they don't need the Democratic voters to win. It screws with the primary equation of politicians need voters to keep their jobs, so politicians are going to listen to what voters want. No, now they don't have to listen. Primarily because, and this is on both sides as well, but generally a lot of the voting population is locked into their party or locked into their political affiliation, and people who are red are going to vote red, and people that are blue are going to vote blue, with exceptions. And that allows this gerrymandering to occur in the first place because then it creates geographical zones where one political party always wins. So then you can plan around that. You can draw districts around that to either cut them out or to give them advantages. It is a end run around how our democracy works by basically rigging the game. Like, yeah, technically you can still vote for people to be your representatives, but they're never going to be people that will do what you want if this occurs. And it will result in effectively us having two different countries, blue coasts and the middle and south being red. Always red and always blue in those regions. Those laws are going to be reflective of that, and we are going to start to, even more so than we already have, culturally and politically drift from each other based off of which party we're a part of. That's bad. That is very bad for the unity of a country. Usually, historically, when historians talk about this, they talk about this being a prelude to civil unrest. It is not a situation we want to be in, but we are in this situation. Now, what can you do about it?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't want the entire episode to be doom and gloom. So we do have some, I don't want to necessarily call them solutions, but some ways that it's not necessarily, we're 100% doomed. There's nothing that can be done.
Yeah, very much. Like, we mentioned the term dummy mander before. And what a dummy mander is when a specific political party separates out the districts to give them an advantage, but they spread their own base vote far too thin, and then very high voter turnout in those districts from the opposing political party can flip those districts, resulting in the party that did the gerrymandering to lose more than they wanted to gain.
So rather than just having one blue district from where Memphis used to be, now all of a sudden the three districts it was split into, all three of them become blue, would be, an ideal, beautiful, I would love to see that happen.
Yeah.
That's effectively what dummy mandering is.
Yeah. And that's what we tried to pull with the campaign race for Afton Bain versus Matt Van Epps. We tried to flip one of Nashville's districts because it looked like it was diluted in the Republican vote side, and that if we could generate a high enough turnout, which we almost did, then we could flip that district away from the Republicans.
Yeah, if you go back, listen, we had an episode on the special election and just voting history, the state of the Democratic Party, I believe was the episode title, where we talk about how had Democratic voters in District 7 showed up to vote, Afton could have won that race.
Yeah, like it got tight enough that your old boy J.D. Vance had to come down and stump for Matt Van Epps. And usually very high-playing national members of the executive branch don't come to stump for politicians unless they think they need help.
And that's, I was going to mention earlier to it, and that just reminded me that the fact that they are doing this, to me anyway, is proof that they are scared of Democratic voters. Like, if you are confident that you can still win a state or win a region or, have a majority of the votes in a certain populated area, you do not feel the need to gerrymander districts.
Yes.
So the fact that they are doing everything they can to suppress the Democratic vote, the black vote, like the Hispanic vote, the women's vote with the SAVE Act, which is a whole nother episode in and of itself. Like, that is proof to me that they know that they are fighting a losing battle.
Yeah.
If we, the people, do something about it.
Yeah, like if you look at the overall wider picture metrics, Trump is starting to dip below 40% popularity on most metrics that these polls poll for, favorability, how good he's doing on the economy, how good is he doing on foreign relations, etc. He's all underwater with a vast majority of the pollsters on this. The Republican Party are doing things that are incredibly unpopular in many states, such as allowing data centers to come in and suck up all the aquifer water and raise electricity bills on people who are connected to the same grid as the data center. Grocery prices have not gone down. We can attest.
Don't even get me started on gas prices. I'm thankful that I don't need gas right now.
How about that over $4 a gallon? Huh? Yeah.
For regular.
Regular, not super,
not diesel.
For just regular old slam it in the Honda Civic, I'm paying over $4 a gallon because we decided to go to war with Iran. There is a lot stacking up against the Republicans politically, which shows me that they are not redistricting this because there is any honest, ethical, higher purpose motivation beyond this redistricting. What it is they're scared of losing power. So instead of allowing us to have our fair representation, they're going to lock the board in their favor so that they can do what in historical terms is called minority rule, where my party who has the support of less than 50% of the population still controls what all of that population has to do. That's what the Republicans are setting up for, which is essentially a minority rule fixed democracy in the name of Donald Trump situation. Sounds a lot like a modern interpretation of an aristocracy and an oligarchy to me.
Well, and you brought up earlier taxation without representation. I mean, the way, in theory, that this all is supposed to work in every state, not just Tennessee, is you have a certain number of districts and you have a certain number of people. And your people, a certain percentage of them are Republican and a certain percentage of them are Democrat. And obviously you have some independents in there, that, could go either way. But, looking at high level general numbers, you look at your percent Republican, percent Democrat. In theory, your number of districts, the way that they are split, the number of Republicans to number of Democratic districts, those percentages should be about equivalent. So if roughly 80% of your state voters are Republican, then roughly 80% of your district should be Republican.
Yes.
Not 100% of your districts, because not 100% of your people vote Republican. So in the case of Tennessee, and I will pull these up real quick because I actually found these numbers pretty interesting. For those of you who have listened for a while, I'm the numbers girl here.
Yeah, I'm the history guy. It reflects our degrees.
According to independentvoterproject.org, and I will say that again, it is independentvoterproject.org. So, these could be maybe a little biased towards independent voters. But according to this website, for the state of Tennessee, of the 4.3-ish million registered voters, roughly 18% are registered Democrat, and roughly only 34% are registered Republican. The remaining 48% are registered as independent / some other option. So even if we assume every single one of those independent voters votes Republican in an election, which is very unlikely that 100% of them vote Republican, but even if they do, that still leaves us with 20% Democrats in the state. So of our 9 districts, roughly 1 to 2 of those districts should always be Democratic, because that is a accurate representation of what the entire population of the state of Tennessee looks like.
Yes. And it used to be that way. You had Nashville and you had Memphis.
And then, Knoxville, every now and then that county would, flip back and forth. But for the most part, it was Memphis and Nashville. You could always count. We're going to be your 2 blue districts.
Yeah. But, well, they've decided, and no shit, the state house politicians have said this, that Tennessee is a conservative state, so the delegation that they send to Washington, D.C. should be all conservative. That's their justification. They are pretending that that percentage of Democrats within the state doesn't exist anymore, or does not exist politically. So they're just going to take away all of our representation. Ooh, if you don't want to vote for the Republican, they're too damn bad because
or just move. That's one of my favorites.
Or just move. They're either saying leave the state if you want political representation while being taxed, or or deal with it.
Yeah,
essentially. And to me, that's completely unacceptable. That is an abdication of one of the big tenets of our constitutional order, the way it was intended by the founders, and the way it's been intended by great men and women who have come before us for decades and decades. We've essentially do not have a Voting Rights Act anymore. They've found a way to loophole around it with a conservative Supreme Court majority. And this has been going on for a long time. This has been the mission of Justice Roberts on the Supreme Court to gut the Voting Rights Act. It's probably part of the reason why he was brought in under Reagan to do so. And as you notice, for decades, Republicans have been fighting to not even necessarily get the House as much as get the presidency so they can determine who the next Supreme Court justices are, so they can bring this into fashion, so they can finally remove all of those districts in the South that were protected under Section 2. This redistricting fight, it is not a whim of Trump. It is not a accident that it is happening now. It has been a long, long project of the Republican political coalition since the days of Reagan, really since the Voting Rights Act was passed, in order to destroy it and to bring about another era of Jim Crow, which would effectively lock the South into one type of representation and one type of political and ideological representation only. It's frustrating. It's more than frustrating. It's downright scary for our democracy, how this has been going on so fast. And personally, I don't blame the Democrats for fighting fire with fire on this, because if we try to take the high road and say, oh, well, we're not going to redistrict in blue states, then effectively what's going to happen is we're going to be knocked out in every single red state. They're going to gain a permanent majority in the National House of Representatives, and then they're going to pass laws to further cement their majority and to chip away at blue states and their ability to represent themselves in the union and their ability to be a part of the union.
Well, and you have to at least give props to the blue states that are doing this redistricting. At least every blue state that I've seen do it has put it as a vote to its residents prior to doing any redistricting. All of the red states are just like, F it, we're just going to do it.
Yeah. Oh, what do you know? The blue state redistricts happen to actually ask their people if they want to do it first, while the red states do it in probably not smoke-filled back rooms anymore. They've got metal smoke detectors on them now.
They're not even doing it in back rooms anymore. They're just doing it out for everyone to see.
Yes. But my comment on that was that when they actually draw the maps, there's no voters in there, and they are not asking the voters whether this map is okay. They bring the map to the state house, and then they all have their little vote while we are out there yelling at them, screaming at them, trying to be heard, saying, no, we don't want this map. We want our small amount of representation we get in this state. They're just not listening. Whereas in the blue states with their redistricting, they are actually listening and they are going ahead with the consent of their people. To me, that says a lot, that this is less a corruption on both sides issue as much as it is the problem of gerrymandering's already been there. Republicans have fully and openly weaponized it against the Democrats, and the Democrats are fighting back with their own redistricting weapon while they still have the chance to do so in a more ethical fashion than the Republicans are doing so. Which, don't get me wrong, this is a political fight between the Democrats and the Republicans, and not the kind of stagey, debate performance style fights we've seen decades prior. Like, this is real existential stuff going on, where it will determine the future of how our country looks in terms of representation and how the people are represented in this country.
Deep breath after all that.
Yeah.
But really, at the end of the day, what all of this comes down to is we have to go vote. Like that. Once these districts are set in stone, the only way that we flip them blue is by going to vote. Like I recognize and even feel it to a certain extent myself. It is very easy to lose hope when things like this happen, that, oh, well, now we're just going to have 3 red districts instead of 1 blue one, or however the math works out. But that only happens when we give up and sit home, don't go vote, because we assume the Republicans are just going to win anyway. Like we talked about with Afton Bain, we could have done it. Especially because it was a special election. Voter turnout is never as high, in a special election or in a midterm like it is for a presidential election. Like, it is these one-off special elections, even midterms. Like, it is these kind of more unpopular election cycles where we really need to show up, because that's when we have the best chance of winning.
Yes. I mentioned earlier, the solution, how you fight back against this as a voter, is turn out the vote, turn out the vote, turn out the vote operations. Try to build the Democratic and even wider the anti-Republican voting base in each district, and try to dummy-mander those districts, to flip them so that we can send more state representatives to the state legislature. If we can get enough state representatives in the state legislature that believe in ethically and constitutionally drawing districts that are fair to the makeup of the voting population, then we can get new maps that fix this. At the end of the day, what fixes this is new redistricting maps right after the census. And how we do that is by dummy-mander flipping these districts. How you do that as a person is try to connect with as many people as you can. Try to, as the Democratic Party and even amongst independents, stump candidates who are going to say that they are going to fix this redistricting problem, that they want to fix it, and get them elected. That is the test at the end of the day, is we have to get our voter turnout and our numbers high enough that we can flip these diluted Republican districts. Because make no mistake, the Republicans have had to dilute their vote, especially in the west of Tennessee, to do this. There's even rumors that with how much the Republicans are angering the Hispanic populations in southern states, especially Texas, that might result in dummy-manders by themselves.
And if the numbers that I read were even remotely correct, that nearly 50% of the state are truly independent voters and not dedicated one way or the other, combined with Trump's approval rating on most issues that the nation is facing right now, that is a promising combination of numbers. That means that it's likely a lot of those independents are fed up with this conservative, you vote red just because you're red, and when we're not seeing any policy changes that actually improve our lives. Like, our odds of flipping those on the fence voters are probably higher now than they have been ever.
Yes. And to any independent voter that might see this, the Republicans are effectively taking your accurate representation away from you as well. This gerrymandering, this redistricting, drawing these voter district lines the way they are only advantageous to Republicans and their political project. If you, I don't even care how you feel about the Democratic Party. If you yourself as an independent want to be represented accurately, you also need new maps that accurately represent you. You need a voting district that actually takes you into account when it is being made, because otherwise your candidates are going to be MAGA and MAGA. And if you are not completely on board with everything that the MAGA project wants to do to this country, then too bad. So even when I went through my independent phase, I know that I would definitely have a feeling about that as well, especially since this country won't even let there be an independent party.
So vote.
Yeah.
Vote. We just had our county primary not too long ago. So the next kind of big election to look out for coming up is the August general primary. But please keep in mind the primary for the general election in August is the county general election. So the on the August ballot, you will be doing primary candidates for federal elections, but it will be the final election for a lot of county seats. So it is very important to go vote in the August primary because it's not just primary candidates. It honestly probably has more of an impact on your local situation than the federal general election in November will. So
Yeah.
we will, as we get closer, we will be sure to keep you aware of voting deadlines, registration deadlines, all of that good stuff. But just wanted to get that on everyone's minds now that August will be the next big one to look out for.
Absolutely. Absolutely. How we fix this is by getting local state candidates who support fair voting districts into seats. And by expanding the voting population who will vote for those people enough to get them into their seats. No other way really fixes this. This is a bit of a sneaky good trap that the Republicans have been rigging for a long time. And it's not just going on in Tennessee, it's going on across the country. So, yes, the August primary, that is the most important one if you are concerned about redistricting. Go vote, go look at the candidates and see which ones have the best opinions on this issue and see who really represents you. That's also how you do it, by really getting people who will represent you.
So
Yeah.
we hope to see you at the polls. We hope to see you at meetings. We hope to see you at protests. Get out there, get involved, and we will be back next week.
Absolutely.